Hi boys and girls, so today I'm going to read you chapter 5, Down the River of Flat Stanley. So let's listen up, enjoy another great chapter of this really fun story. The lamb chaps followed the sun westward across the savannah, as Captain Tony had instructed. Soon more and more trees sprung up around them, and they came to a river. They walked along the muddy bank. The sun was high in the sky. Drops of sweat ran from Stanley's forehead down his body. There's the picture. Are we there yet? Arthur asked for what seemed like the millionth time. No, Arthur, Mr. Lambchop said in a weary voice. They kept walking. Their shoes made sucking sound as they stepped in and out of the mud. Suddenly, there was a low growling, and Stanley froze in fear. Arthur looked at his stomach. I'm hungry, he whined. Look at that, said Mr. Lambchop, pointing down the bank. It was a canoe pulled up on the shore. The Lambchops found a paddle inside. Mr. Lambchop scanned the area. Stanley, exactly how far downriver? Did Captain Tony say to go? Mr. Lambchop asked. A few hours, replied Stanley. On foot or by boat? Stanley realized he didn't know. My feet hurt, grumbled Arthur, and I have mud in my socks. Whose canoe do you think this is? Stanley asked his father. Mr. Lambchop shrugged. I don't know. Perhaps the owners went hunting. Meanwhile, Arthur climbed into the canoe. Ah, he said, putting his feet up on a seat. Arthur Lambchop, Mr. Lambchop said sternly, are you stealing something? Someone else's canoe? No, Arthur rolled his eyes. I'm sitting in someone else's canoe. Would it be stealing if we borrowed it and brought it right back? Stanley suggested. Mr. Lambchop looked at Stanley. Yes, it would, he said. There was a rustling in the brush nearby. Onto the bank stepped a very tall man with enormous holes in his earlobes. His body was draped in red cloth, and in his hand was a staff taller than Stanley. He stopped short when he saw the Lambchops. Arthur, Mr. Lambchop whispered out of the side. Oh, he whispered, so I kind of yelled. Arthur, whispered, Mr. Lambchop whispered out of the side of his mouth. Arthur nearly jumped out of his skin when he saw the tribesmen. Behind the man, a woman also swathed in red appeared. She held a baby wrapped in patterned cloth close to her body. The man squinted at the Lambchops. Then he turned and fixed his gaze at Stanley. He came closer. Stanley flinched as the man leaned close and peered behind Stanley's head. He looked Stanley right in the eyes. What happened to you? The man asked. I was flattened by my own bulletin board, Stanley answered. You speak English? Sputtered Mr. Lambchop. And French, too, the man said. I am of the Maasai tribe, but I am also a graduate of the Sorbonne in Paris. This land is our home, and you, young man, he continued, turning to Arthur. What do you think you are doing in our canoe? Don't be so hard on him, the woman said. He is just a boy. They are clearly lost. The baby squealed with delight at the sight of Stanley. Mr. Lambchop rummaged through his pocket and came up with the newspaper clipping. We're trying to get to the spot marked by the X. The man and woman studied the article. Many believe that the first people lived in Africa, said the man, and then walked